All right, welcome back to another episode of Travel Ball Talk. I'm your host, Rich Prado, owner of Play in School. Today we're just heading up I-95 from my home in Richmond, Virginia, to visit with Jeremy Duncan, owner-founder of NoVa Elite and The Yard up in Manassas, Virginia. So he's probably, Jeremy, you're probably, what, about 90 minutes from Richmond?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to getting to know Jeremy and learning about NoVa Elite. We've been talking for a few minutes, and about 3 times in a row, I said, "Oh, don't tell that story. Let's just hit record." And then I'd ask him another question. I said, "Oh, don't tell that story." And so Jeremy was about to kind of give me his background. For those of you listening, this is literally Jeremy and I's first conversation. So enjoy our awkwardness as we get to know each other live on a recorded line. So Jeremy, you were going to give me your background, and I cut you off. So why don't you take the mic for a few seconds and a few minutes? Tell us about your baseball background, how, and then bridge the gap on where and how NoVa Elite and The Yard came to be.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me on today. It's a pleasure and an honor. So my name is Jeremy Duncan. I'm the owner of NoVa Elite Baseball Academy and The Yard at NoVa Elite. We are based out of Manassas, Virginia. And we're about halfway through our 4th year in existence. Personally, myself, a little bit of background. I was born in Florida as my dad was in the Navy, and then he decided to go get his doctorate at Texas A&M. So I grew up watching and playing baseball down in Texas and got to watch some pretty special college baseball come through under the mentorship and coaching of Mark Johnson in the 80s. And I got to watch Chuck Knobloch and Ever Magianis and some of those Texas A&M greats come through for about $1 a game.
That's awesome.
So as a kid, I mean, you really couldn't grow up under much of a better environment to learn baseball than growing up down there, watching some of those great teams come through Texas A&M. So I am by far and away a Texas A&M diehard, kind of through and through. Following my dad getting his doctorate, we relocated up here to the Northern Virginia area, where my mother was a teacher in Fairfax County Public Schools. My dad worked down in D.C., so I grew up going to middle school at Robinson High School, Robinson Secondary. And then for my freshman and sophomore year of high school, I played for Dean Sisler over at Marshall High School before transitioning my junior and senior year over to Bethlehem Baptist Christian Academy because at the time my mother took a job as a choral instructor over at West Springfield High School. And as a junior transferring to another public school, you just didn't know if anyone really knew you. Fortunately for me, Coach Tugwell's son was a freshman on that team my junior year. So, Tugwell's kid was pretty good at that time. So it would have been a nice competition between the two of us. So I went to Bethlehem Baptist my junior and senior year, which was a small Baptist school in Fairfax County. We played against competition like Riverdale Baptist and the Heights and St. Anselm's and some of these private schools in the area. So we faced, in the 90s, we were facing kind of Riverdale Baptist at their height. And so that was a good test of skills for myself as a baseball player, and I really grew and had some opportunities. I went to an open tryout for the Florida Marlins my senior year. I was fortunate enough to get an invite down to rookie ball with them before I ended up having some elbow surgery. I had my ulnar nerve relocated, and that knocked me out for about 18 months and kind of killed my playing career at that point. because minor league players were paid even worse than what they are now. So it was a good, for me as a baseball player, having put all of my hopes and dreams into playing baseball. The one takeaway that I took from that experience was it doesn't matter how good you think you are, because when you get to that level, everybody is as good as that, if not better. And so, I've transitioned kind of that tutelage into training our players with having them understand you might think that you're hitting all these individual milestones and metrics, but somebody out there is hitting them at the same time, if not hitting one step ahead of you. And so we always have to be working hard if we want to achieve those dreams and goals. There's never a time to be just satisfied with where you are.
So let's back up a second. The tryout was right after your senior year in high school, correct?
It was actually, I want to say it was May, the senior year of high school. It was down at Mary Washington.
That's amazing. You don't hear about the open tryouts as much today. They used to be pretty prevalent. What year was that, by the way? What year were you?
Would have been 1996.
96. You're 1 year ahead of me in high school. That's that the open tryout. I don't think that's a thing. Now I know they're bringing they will do some invite sort of workouts, but that's awesome. Where it used to be, anybody could just show up and throw a pen or run a 60, and they'd watch you run a 60 and say, "Yeah, you could go home."
Right. I mean, I was fortunate enough to run around a 6.31, 6.33 60.
Whoa!
So I was like blisteringly fast, and that was kind of my calling card. And so it was really interesting because my 60 time got the wow factor. I had a pretty good arm, I would say, throwing across the infield. I was in the 80s because I was a shortstop. But I was only 6 feet tall, 150 pounds. So I had to maximize every ounce of strength and athleticism that I had just to get where I was. And so, it was interesting. There were about 250 kids at the tryout, and there were a lot of guys that were bigger than me. A story that I tell all my kids that are infielders is when you go to these tryouts, they do their best. At the time, they did their best to kind of trust everybody's, let's say, certifications. Well, how would we say that? Let's just say they did their best to trust that your birth certificate was legitimate.
Yeah.
And there was a gentleman who every bit looked in his 30s, and he was from the Dominican Republic, and the cutoff age was 26 years old. And so I asked him, I was like, dude, you look like you're like jacked. You look like you're in your mid 30s. He's like, yeah, well, my birth certificate says I'm 22. I don't really know how old I am.
Oh.
But I thought that I would come to this tryout.
Good grief.
It was kind of the Wild West of baseball in the 90s.
Yeah.
So it was a really eye-opening experience. It was fun. I had a blast. But I try to take these instances where I learned something, and I try to use that to teach our kids.
So from that tryout, and the injury, where did you end up leaving there and then going to college?
So I did. I went to Asbury College, which was NAIA. It's out in Kentucky.
Okay.
And because I had not signed officially with an agent, I was able to play a season out there with them before I just decided that college wasn't right for me. It was one of those. So growing up in an educator's home, because both my mother was a Fairfax County teacher and my father had taught at Sam Houston State University when he was getting his doctorate. Both of my parents were educators. So for me, it was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my education. Prior to accepting that invite by the Marlins, I had been recruited by Coach Fox when he was at North Carolina Wesleyan, before he was at UNC.
Yeah, likewise, I was too.
Yeah.
I went down on a visit with him, and for me, I was just like, man, NC Wesleyan is smaller than my high school.
Yep.
And for those listening who aren't familiar with North Carolina Wesleyan, well, obviously Mike Fox has gone on to Carolina and won a lot of games at UNC. But when he was at Wesleyan, he won a lot of games there, and that was one of the top Division III baseball programs in the country. Like just a perennial power. So that's a small world. Cool.
Yeah. Yep. So going out to Asbury, I thought that I wanted to go into education, and I had decided that the academic route just didn't fit me correctly. I knew that I wanted to teach, and I knew that I had an idea of the skills that I had in communicating with kids, players, a variety of different people. But I didn't know that I wanted to tie myself to a school classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of flitted around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was a video store manager at Hollywood Video because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I started dabbling in some computer technology and studying data and being a network administrator and then a project manager. But the love for that profession just wasn't there. Baseball just kept calling. So, in and around that time, I ended up getting married. I had a couple of kids. And my oldest son, who's 17 now, he wanted to play soccer. And I'm like, man, I don't know anything about soccer. But I studied enough that I coached him for a few years before he made a travel soccer team in Warrenton. And that kind of got that blood flowing for coaching again. So at 12 years old, he's like, Dad, I don't want to play soccer anymore. I want to play baseball like you played. I said, all right, well, this is going to be a mess. So I volunteered as a rec league coach with a friend of mine out in Brentsville. We coached together for a couple of seasons. And Jake started getting a little better, and then tried out for an organization on Tyson's Corner on travel team. I wasn't exactly sure why they said yes, other than the fact that I knew that my kid probably wasn't good enough to play travel. But we kind of rolled with it. I wanted him to get some experience, and I didn't want to have to coach him. So it lasted about 3 games, and the coach said, hey, your son said you used to play. Do you want to come sit on the bench and help me call pitches? I was like, man, I guess I can do that. I really didn't want to have to coach my kid, so if you coach my kid, I'll handle the pitching staff. So I did, and 2 games later, I was on the bench by myself because the other coach stopped showing up, and I was coaching this travel team. And so I was like, all right, well, I can – to me, I said, I can do better than this. There's things that I'm seeing from going to all these tryouts that I just don't like when I view the travel baseball landscape. There's not enough care and passion for teaching of these prospective players that want to grow in the game. It's just, let's roll the ball out, let's have a kind of half-cocked practice, and let's go just play some baseball. Because the parents just want games. And I said, that's not how I grew up. That's not the ethos that I grew up under. I grew up under, learning from guys that actually had a passion for coaching and teaching you something and helping you grow as a man. So that's when I founded NoVa Elite. It was back in 2018. My kid obviously played for me for a few years. He's not playing baseball anymore, and we can get into that at some other time. But in 2018, we started out. I had a a friend of mine, Ryan Massimo, who wanted to start NoVa Elite together. Unfortunately, Ryan had a heart attack in his late 30s and is no longer with us. But when we started out with a 12U and a 14U, and we were awful.
Yeah.
I mean, like, when we're talking awful, we're talking awful. I had a group of parents that wanted their 14-year-olds to compete in showcase tournaments. So we signed up for a showcase tournament at High Point, North Carolina, against the Rawlings Tigers team that was using wood bats, and we were using metal, and it took us 52 minutes to get out of the top half of the first inning.
Oh.
So it was bad. And so for me, as an owner and as a baseball coach, I had to do a complete overhaul of what I was doing. I took that upon myself, and I said, there is a lot that I had assumed, but that I didn't put the work in to follow through on that. So I dialed everything back in our organization, and I decided to change the whole landscape of what we were doing.
Can I pause you there? What were some of those assumptions as you went in? And what did you switch gears on?
So I had assumed that kids that wanted to play travel baseball had that inner drive that we had when we grew up to just be better than everyone else.
Can I jump the shark and say that you found out that in some circumstances, quote unquote, travel ball is actually, for some people, just an alternative to playing Little League?
Correct.
Yeah.
I will absolutely 100% agree with you on that.
Not for everybody, for some kids, especially at the youth level. Well, exactly. I will say this, and this is not a knock on this is not a knock on parents, because everyone has their own reasons for putting their kids in sports. But in Northern Virginia, especially, where status matters so much, for your kid, whether your kid actually wants to play baseball or not, to be on that top level is paramount for the parents more than it is the kids. Yeah.
So I've found that that's a huge battle that we as travel ball coaches that just want to see kids have the opportunity to play at that next level. That's something that we battle on a regular basis with parents. I call it program buy-in. You actually want your kids to make it to that next level to play. And that's a huge sacrifice for a lot of families. Mm-hmm. That's sacrificing vacation time. That's sacrificing other activity time. That's nights. That's your commute is an hour every morning, and you're sacrificing another 2 to 3 hours every night for your kid to go play sports.
When some of these kids at the end of the day, it wasn't even really their choice. It was just their parents took them to Tryout or just signed them up. You know what I mean? And like, they're not
exactly.
It's not the kid who's driven to be the best on the field. For him, it's just like this. It's a kind of fun activity with a bunch of other kids his age.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So that was an assumption that you had to overcome. Now I want to lead you back to your your original story. So keep going on that.
So, after that first year, we did a little bit of revamping we got a little bit more granular with our tryout process. We actually did some interviews with parents as well as the kids to make sure that the fit for our program was the right fit. And so that, you try really hard to be respectful and approach it in a respectful way. Some people took it the right way. Some people did not.
So it served its purpose.
It absolutely did. And I will tell you, as I have grown as a baseball coach and as an owner, there are absolutely some key content, especially I do reading more than I do watching TV or watching movies. I don't have the time. but I can listen to a podcast. I can listen to an ebook. When I'm traveling, I listen to a lot of ebooks. And one of my very favorite books that I've ever read or listened to is the Matheny Manifesto.
Oh, absolutely. So I think you're the second. I think this might be the second conversation in a row that somebody brought that up. Great book.
Yeah, it is. It changed a lot of perspective for me. You have to have an ethos that you're willing to stick to, and sometimes that's painful. But if it is in the best interest of every kid that comes through your program, or the vast majority of kids that come through your program, then you have to be willing to stand up and hold your ground and have a high ground that you want to defend, just because you know the landscape better than a lot of these parents know it, and you just want the best thing for the kids.
Are you still doing these the parent interviews?
So we do, after every season, we do a debrief of the season with the parents and the kids. So we sit down after every season and we give you a rundown of areas that you've improved on, areas that you have that you're still needing development, and then we talk to the parents about where they feel like they're at with our program.
But you're not doing specific interviews before bringing a kid and a family into the organization.
So if I have, so one of the things that you learn and develop, or at least I've learned and developed when I watch tryouts, is I tend to do a lot of the assessments. I don't hit fungos or throw BP, not because I can't, but because I prefer to be the eyeballs on the kid. Mm. But the other thing that I do is I watch the eyeballs of the parents and the parental interactions while they're with other parents on the sidelines, and I can tell which parents are parents that have either played and know how to hold themselves in a certain manner, and ones that are, I call them helicopter parents. Mm-hmm. They want to be involved in every action that their kid does. We tend to have more success with the parents that are a little more hands-off, even at the 10U, 11U, 12U. They just trust that the process is going to happen. Mm-hmm. Then the parents that are, as soon as their kid, fields and goes off to the side in a tryout, they're right there handing them a Gatorade. That's a big red flag to us. We try, not that we're not caring parents, because we're all parents in some capacity for the most part. It's just that at some point as a parent, like I wanted to be when my son started playing baseball, you have to be willing to step back and trust that coach to do his job. And if you're not happy with the job that the coach does, you can talk to that coach, or you can go, find a program that's a better fit for your family, because you're interviewing us as much as we're interviewing you.
Bingo. That's well said. Well said. I'm like, I'm still a little bit in shock when you say you at one point in time were interviewing parents before you even offered their kid a spot on the team. I wonder if there's any coaches going, oh, I wish I'd have done that with the Joneses or the Smiths, because it really does make a big difference, like what the family dynamic is, or what the parental, when you've got these 15 or 20 kids on a team, and there's a couple parents over there who are sort of just rocking the boat, like, yep. And it almost doesn't matter how good the kid is, like,
right?
It's like you'd rather sacrifice a little bit of talent on the field for any sort of drama beyond the foul lines with mom and dad.
I would.
Yeah.
I would. If a lot of coaches, and there's literally nothing wrong with trying to get as much talent as you can, because really at the end of the day, we're trying to develop and get talent and help them get to the next level. But the headache just isn't worth it to me.
Right.
I'll take this year we're looking at year number 2 of having a senior class. And we all know how hard it is just to play college baseball. And we're looking at 14 of the 16 seniors that we have going to play college baseball.
There you go.
So
that's good.
Are they Division I kids? Not right now because we're new. But I have a lot of JUCO. I have some JUCO kids. I have a lot of D3 kids. I have a couple of D2 kids. But that's where their talent is, and honestly, that's where we've advised them to go play because that's really and truly where their talent level stands. Perfect.
One thing I want to sort of go into now a little bit is the facility, sort of in the relationship between the teams, NoVa Elite, and in the facility, the yard, because I'm sure there's going to be a few coaches listening who are in the same boat as you, who run both. So, talk to us. What was it? Which came first? I'm assuming the teams came first, or did they come simultaneously? And then talk about sort of like the relationship. You were about to talk to me about this before we hit record. It was one of the things I stopped you on. So, tell us about that relationship.
So that will dive a little bit into a little of the founding and some of the trials that NoVa Elite Baseball has gone through in the last couple of years. So we founded NoVa Elite in 2018, and the baseball side came first. Not knowing the landscape of I grew up around here in this area, so I knew a lot of the coaches that I would be competing against. But figuring out how the county runs travel. So we started out with our 2 teams. Everybody's got to rent from the county. It's you find in Northern Virginia there's so many teams, everybody's battling for the same field.
Yeah, sure.
And so you figure out kind of how other teams are, in a sense, gaming the system to get fields. And in some ways it's just longevity. So we were renting fields like everybody else and going about our business. And we had a loose partnership with a workout facility that had a single batting cage. And as we grew, it just didn't fit us anymore. And then COVID hit. COVID hit in 2019, 2020.
Yeah, March of 2020 is when they shut everything down.
Yep. So in March of 2020, I looked at my fiance and I said, you know what? I'm biting off a facility.
There you go.
We're just going to get our own facility. Everybody else is shutting down, and guess what? Let's find the right space for us, and let's make this full-time. Because up until that point, NoVa Elite Baseball was my second job.
You were still doing the project management.
Correct. I was a project manager down at National Geographic, which was 40 to 65 hours a week, and then I'd come home and I'd go coach baseball. And that was almost 7 days a week for me. So I said, let's get a facility. Let's do it the right way. Let's make it so that it's sustainable kind of on its own. And so we found a spot in Manassas that is about 8,000 square feet. We turned all of our cages sideways, so they're shorter cages, but I can have 7 cages going with a pitching lane. We have Rapsodo in the facility, and we use when we do like running times, we have laser gates for that, just because we want to make sure that we have maximum. What am I trying to say? Can't think of the word. We want to make sure that we have maximum accuracy. So we've got this facility. I found a warehouse that was giving away free turf, and it's the old outside turf from a multi-use field. So I said I have 4,000 square feet that I need to turf out, and they dropped 40,000 square feet of turf out back of my facility.
Wait. So what did you do with the other 36,000 that you didn't need?
So so each roll weighs about 3,500 pounds.
Yeah, you can't can't just push that around. Holy crap!
Correct. So I have I have 26 rolls of turf sitting out back by the curb behind our facility that I just don't know what to do with right now.
Holy cow. Yeah, I think you could probably sell it or donate it. I don't know.
I mean, if somebody wants turf,
come get it.
Come talk to me.
Yeah.
I have plenty.
Keep a few rolls, because when you wear out your first round, you'll have the backup ready to go.
Absolutely. So we started. The facility's name is the Yard at NoVa Elite. They're both owned by me. NoVa Elite Baseball Academy rents from the Yard. So they are two separate entities, but closely married. We don't really have a whole lot of other teams that are using our facility, and we did that kind of on purpose. With the facility, okay, so let me scale back just a touch. We have roughly 130 odd kids in our program. Each one of those kids has a membership to the Yard as part of our program. They are, I won't get into the finances, but with those memberships, they have access to the facility. They have access to all of our strength and conditioning programs. They get a lesson with one of our instructors. They can come in and use the facility whenever they feel like it. So they're not tied to just those times where they have specific events. So that's part of our organization, and we did that on purpose. We did that for two reasons. One, it sustains the facility on its own. That way, the rent is always paid, the lights are always on. Mm-hmm. The parents are basically investing in that portion of their kids' future. But that's not the main reason that we did this. The main reason that we did the membership is because we saw, by and large, there was a lack of dedication in general in travel baseball to the development, the really true development of kids. And that comes back to my teaching background, or the teaching desire that I had. Why am I coaching? Well, I'm coaching because I want to impart the knowledge that I have, or the knowledge that I accrue over time, down to these kids that are trying to get better in the game because they want to take it to that next level. And so how can I do that? How can I personally and my staff do that for these kids without breaking every parent's pocketbook? So we came up with a package that we could put together that put the kids in our facility under a knowledgeable and watchful eye, where they could grow and develop, and it would then become a really wholesome activity for them to partake in, rather than playing video games, rather than being on your phone, rather than getting into trouble. Now they're in a really good environment where they can get better at something that will help them at the later stages of their life. And
they don't have to pay every single time they walk through the door,
correct,
because it's a membership model. We've talked about it on this podcast many times. The facilities that are going membership model. I think that's the major unlock. I think that's a huge opportunity for people. It's I know not everybody wants to do it, but the ones who are, I think, are loving it. It turns what can be a really seasonal business into a nice, consistent, flat revenue stream where you don't have the peaks and valleys of the traditional baseball business. So that's cool that you already got that. You're a step ahead. What's interesting is a lot of the facilities in our region are they're not like intentionally tied to the travel team, even though they probably have a travel team that's like their main customer, if you will. But you guys are almost embracing it the way I've got some partners I work with out of Boston, and they work the same way, and their teams are it's essentially almost like a private club, and that's almost like what you've described. Even though it sounds like you let people from the community in, but it's not the majority of what's going on.
Right. Yeah, the majority of what we're doing is organizational based. We've had some people ask us, come to me and ask, hey, we've heard about your program. We've heard about the yard. We know that our kid's not quite good enough to play travel baseball. Can we sign him up for your membership? Have him start coming in, getting some experience with the clinics, with working one-on-one with some of your coaches. And we absolutely embrace whatever opportunities we have that we can teach someone to get better. And that just falls in line with our ethos.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm a big fan of that that model. Big fan. So, I always have these set standards questions, if you will.
Sure.
And I think this might be a good time to hit a couple of them. You already mentioned the Matheny Manifesto. Is there, besides that, is there a different book or movie or website that you think every coach, or podcast, or anything else, a resource that you think is like, mandatory listening or mandatory reading for a coach?
So, my fiance will tell you that I'm basically a walking Bull Durham quote.
I love it. Yes.
So you see lots of stuff, and so I usually tell our older players, if your parents approve, I suggest that you watch this movie because it absolutely hits on some very key components of baseball.
So good. I think I've been asking this question for a long time. I think you're the first person to bring it up.
It is.
I might have to watch that tonight.
It is by far and away my favorite baseball movie.
So good.
And so other than that, another book that we have told a lot of our players that they need to read is Heads Up Baseball. And I received that as a suggestion from one of our basically guest coaches who works very intimately with our program, and that is Tiger Peterson. He is a AA coach for the St. Louis Cardinals and is Jock Peterson's older brother.
Gotcha.
He and I have become really good friends lately. Over the last couple of years as we've worked together, and he has a pretty in-depth hand in a lot of the things that we do as an organization. And so I really try to pick the brain of guys that are higher level than me, and I think that's how we learn best. And so he is a very integral part to our organization, and has suggested that we all read Heads Up Baseball. And for our kids that have read it, it's really and truly changed their mentality about how they approach the game.
Heads Up Baseball is a staple in the baseball world of those people who seek out that mental edge. Written by Dr. Ken Ravizza and Tom Hansen. Dr. Ravizza passed away probably about 3.5 years ago. But he's sort of legendary in this space. He was I would say ahead of his time in that mental skills, mental sharpening space, specifically in the world of baseball. So that's a good one. I'm glad you mentioned that one because I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Yeah, that's a big part of our organization.
Now you mentioned the
mental approach.
Yeah, at the facility you've got some of the toys and gizmos and gadgets. What are some of the tech toys you like playing with?
Personally, I like working with Win Reality. That's my favorite toy to play with in the facility. We have some stations up. We have about 1,000 square feet in a classroom upstairs, and in that we section it out, and we have a couple of Oculus devices.
That's so cool.
And we have the bat connectors, and so we send kids up with a coach, and they've got to work through pitch sequences and pitch recognition and some drills like that without ever hitting a baseball. And I think that's so important for kids.
So I may have fiddled with it. I remember seeing when that came out a few years ago, but it's not something that I'm intimately familiar with. But I've seen it a little bit of on Twitter. And here's my take. And I want you to sort of tell me if I'm close or if I'm way off. I feel like you're going to get reps as far as seeing pitches over and over and over and over again, which is obviously really beneficial. So if you can see and identify that pitch, that's like that to me is the golden ticket.
Yep.
Now when you take it a half a step farther, and I see the swings that some of the at least the kids and players I've seen on Twitter take, those swings look terrible. They don't look like real swings, right? It's sort of like a half a swing.
Right.
Am I way off? Am I close? So, I mean, what's your take? Because you're in there every day playing with it.
So that's part of the coach portion of what we do with that device. We don't want any of our kids from the time that they step into our facility to the time that they leave to take anything less than 100% on their swing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can, one of our biggest hitting things is when you can figure out where your absolute maximum 100% is, and you can swing out of your shoes, then we can start correcting little pieces of your swing so that we don't ever take away that maximum. We just fix some of the mechanics along the way. So we have our kids swing hard when they're on the win reality stuff. Whether it computes or not, we still want them taking 100%.
Gotcha.
So we have those bat adapters that go with their bats. We give plenty of space with partitions so that there's a safety element, and we want them swinging 100%.
I think that's important. Because some of the Twitter videos I've seen, you just like I'm not trying to like bash on them. I think the technology is awesome. Like because listen, most of hitting is eyes, right? Like, so you're getting eyeball reps more than anything. So that to me is like, overwhelmingly the important part of that technology is just training your eyes to see the ball out of the fingers and make a split-second decision. The swing that is taken on that virtual pitch, just the ones I've seen on Twitter, I'm just like, I don't know. So I like that you're telling your guys, swing it hard, because whether or not you actually hit this virtual pitch might not be the important part. The important part is that you see it, you're getting the eyeball rep, but then you're getting a physical rep with a swing at the same time.
Absolutely.
I could see a kid almost never even taking the bat off the shoulder, just doing eyeball reps. Like I could see that as a station, just like because in just 10 minutes you could probably see 50 or 100 pitches. And that's valuable time spent. That's cool. That's cool. You mentioned those lasers that you're doing with the run. Are you doing like 10-yard splits, or are you running 30s in there? Like what are you guys running in there that you're using the lasers for?
So there's a space out back, a flat space out back on asphalt that we use for running.
Dude, if only you had like 36,000 square feet of turf that you could cover that asphalt up with. And
right.
Man.
So what's funny is, I'll tell you this, I had a section out back that was turfed, and in the HOA of our facility came out and said, absolutely not.
God.
And it was my next door neighbor is the one that didn't like it. He runs a glass company, and he didn't like it. So I had to pull all that up.
You probably covered up some parking spots and whatever.
It's just back. It's in the back where it's delivery areas.
Yeah.
So just didn't want to get in the way of that. So we worked with them on getting all that pulled up.
But like on a nice day, on a day that's like dry without not too slippery, you can go on the asphalt and and you set the lasers up, and I mean out there you're going to run do you get a 60 out of that space?
Yeah, we do a 10-30-60 split.
Oh, cool. So you got 1, 2, 3. So you've got lasers set up at 3 different locations then.
Correct. Yep.
That's interesting.
We felt like that was a worthwhile investment because it takes the human error out of the timer. So if I'll give you an example. I've got a kid that has been in my program for a while. He went to a showcase. He said they clocked me in cleats on grass at a 6.7. And I said, okay, well, I've never seen you run that. So I'm going to put you on asphalt out back, and I'm going to have you run the 60. And you ran the 60 and you got a 7.1. And it was laser timed.
Yeah, but man, I'll tell you, I don't think I'm going to get the same start on asphalt. You ought to take those lasers. You can just throw them in a bag, right?
We take them out to the field too, and
What have you been able to sort of handicap the difference between ideal conditions on a grass field with cleats versus an ideal condition on the pavement out back?
Yeah, it's somewhere between a 3 and a 4/10 of a second.
Slower or faster?
It's slower on grass.
Really?
And
okay.
Well, and the reason for that is running in cleats, running in grass is definitely harder than running in tennis shoes on asphalt.
Okay. Yeah.
And the timer doesn't start until you break the laser.
Uh-huh.
So when you break the laser, then your time starts, and then you break the laser on the other end, and it stops.
So so to go back to that kid, that kid's 6.7 was probably way off.
Correct.
Uh-huh. Which is very simple to do. Listen, if somebody's 0.2 slow on the start and then 0.2 slow on the stop, you're 0.4 off.
Correct.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Absolutely. Now, when we run it in grass with cleats on, that's the time. That's really and truly the time that we will actually give to a college coach.
Yeah, of course.
Because I don't ever give anything other than what would be performed on a baseball field.
Yeah, that's the standard.
Right.
Yeah.
So whatever your time is in cleats on grass, that's what I'm telling the coach.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. What does I'm kind of curious. What's a laser set like that cost? Do you know off the top of your head?
$400. Right about $400.
Okay.
For the initial 60-yard. That's just for 2 pieces. It's about $1,000 for everything altogether.
Yeah, that's not an impulse purchase. That's a purchase for a facility that is going to be focusing on trying to improve those numbers. You know.
Correct.
Do you have a speed guy in house who's like working with your players?
Yeah, I have 2. We have 2. Well, we have 2 guys that are speed and agility / strength and conditioning. I have one gentleman, Slater Aubin, who is more of our strength guy, and then I have another guy, Alonso Ruz, who is our speed and agility guy. Alonso he's got a little better credentials. He has been approached by the Detroit Tigers and the Orioles about working down in the Dominican Republic. And he's from there. And so he comes with an extensive background. He has spent a couple of internships working with Trevor Story and Patrick Mahomes down in Texas over the last couple of summers. So we send our guys out to some of these bigger organizations than us that work with pro athletes so that they can learn and bring that knowledge back to our players.
At the end of the day, you got to be able to hit. But if you can hit, having a little bit of speed is sure a nice thing. And the reality is, a lot of these kids can improve their speeds with just a little bit of technique adjustment. And so having somebody who knows that stuff is quite the asset to have in house. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we put a big emphasis with all of our players on movement, because at the end of the day, you do have to be able to move like an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
So when I assess kids, I assess their skills from the feet up. So the first thing I ever look at a kid when he comes to tryout or whether he comes to work with us, I always look at their feet. To me, that's my first thing. Does a kid walk right? Does he move right? Is he athletic in the way that he moves? What do we need to improve on? And so once I can do that, once I get you to have some good feet, then the rest of it all just starts to click all the way up the chain.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking at the clock. I want to be respectful of your time. And so let's end with one last question here. And this is one I want to make sure I get answers from as many different people on this as possible. If I gave you the magic wand, what one change do you think you could make to travel baseball that would have the biggest positive impact?
It's funny, when I was taking notes, this was the one question that I came up on, and I just didn't have a definitive answer because I don't think that there's just one thing that needs to be fixed. Well,
give us two or three. I don't mind.
So I feel like travel baseball in a lot of ways has lost it's lost the competitiveness that it had when it first started. So making a travel baseball team when it first started, especially in this area, which was the late 90s, it was exclusive. I mean, you had a roster of 15 guys that were all either going to be draftable or they were going to play Division I baseball, and that was the gold standard. Nowadays, I mean, myself included, anybody's able to create a travel baseball organization or at least create a travel team. So I guess my question would be for everybody that's thinking about it or wanting to do it is, what is the reason behind you wanting to do that? Is it because your kid doesn't have a place to play, or is it because, you want to get into it because like me, you want to get into it because you enjoy teaching kids and you want to help them get better? Is it financially? There's a whole multitude of reasons why people do it. I feel like if you're going to do it, you need to do it for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. And that would be because by and large, your passion is to helping kids grow into young men and learn the game of baseball in the right settings. You want it to be competitive. You want it to be a learning, a challenging environment. And ultimately, it's got to be more about them than it's about us.
Yeah. That's a great quote to end on right there, man. I appreciate you coming on the call today. It's been fun getting to know you a little bit. Hopefully you and I get to know each other a little more. We're right up the road from each other. We'll end on that note. Do you have any final parting words for any coaches or parents or players that still might be listening to us?
I would just say that baseball is the greatest game on earth. Make sure that whatever your role is in the game of baseball, that you just emphasize the passion for the sport and pass that on to your kids. Because baseball will last the test of time as long as we've got enough people that love it.
Yeah, here. Hold on one second. I'm gonna stop the call or stop the recording, but don't hang up.